The following is a not-for-profit fan-based adaptation. Fire Emblem, Fire Emblem Awakening, and all related terminology remain property of Nintendo and Intelligent Systems. This is a work of fanfiction and love. Please don't sue us. Now where am I?
Fire Emblem Awakening, Invisible Ties, Episode 1. Darkness, cold, enveloping. He reaches out, grasping at nothingness, his fingers coming back empty from the void. Sounds, indistinct like distant thunder, rumbled in his head, his vision a blur of colors now, mixing into the darkness. The clear, cold ring of steel meeting steel rang out, cutting through the cacophony. Voices now, too, still indistinct.
No, this is not over. Damn you. Damn you both!
Hey, are you okay? Thanks to you, we carried the day. This isn't your fault. Don't blame yourself. Don't.
Darkness, swallowing him up, consuming him. Yet now the darkness has become warm, welcoming, comforting. He looks up, and in the darkness 6 eyes glowing a deep, baleful red stare back.
Well, what do we do?
What do you mean?
We can't just leave him here.
Light flooded his field of vision as he opened his eyes, causing him to blink to focus. Blurred shapes eventually became distinct, and, as he realized he was lying on his back in a field, the forms of 2 strangers came into focus above him. One was a blue-haired man, obviously the older of the 2, but he couldn't be older than 21 or 22. The other was a much younger blonde woman, still in her late teens, eyes widening as he opened his own.
Oh, hi there!
There are better places to take a nap than on the ground, friend. Here.
The blue-haired man reached down, and he took the blue-haired youth's hand, allowing himself to be pulled up. He absently noticed the 6-eyed symbol tattooed on the back of his hand, but chose not to dwell on it in the face of the strangers.
You alright?
Yeah. Thanks, Chrom.
Ah, so you know who I am, then?
No, actually. It just sort of came to me. Weird.
He froze, blinking a few times before sheepishly rubbing the back of his head and trailing off. A momentary sense of panic began to run through his addled mind as he realized that he didn't, in fact, know anything aside from the other man's name.
Oh? So what are you doing all the way out here? And passed out? In a field?
You know what? I'm not really 100% on that one either.
Well then, what's your name? Let's start with that.
No idea.
Oh, I've heard of this. It's called amnesia.
It's called a load of Pegasus crap. We're supposed to believe that you remember my lord's name and not your own?
Another, older man stepped forward now, glowering at him menacingly. The 3rd stranger was bigger than the other 2, and wearing heavy blue and white plate armor. Obviously a knight of some sort, considering he was holding the reins to a large brown warhorse wearing plates of similar armor. How he had missed him was a mystery for later, though. The knight was obviously unimpressed with the stranger's attitude, giving the man a modicum of confidence he didn't have a moment ago.
Well, it's true.
What if it is true, Frederick? We can't leave him out here, alone and confused. What kind of shepherds would we be if we did?
Uh-huh.
The blonde woman was nodding empathetically in agreement, eagerness oozing off of her. He decided he liked her and Chrom more than Frederick. Frederick looked about to object further, before he nodded as if the very motion caused him pain, his glare at the man capable of melting steel.
Very well, my lord, but I would advise caution all the same.
It's settled then. We'll take him to the closest town. Someone will be able to steer him in the right direction there.
Wait, I don't get a say in this?
Nope.
Don't worry. Once we get to town, we'll hear you out. There are better places than open fields to talk.
He resisted the urge to groan. beginning to follow Chrom and the girl who had yet to name herself down the road. With a guilty pang, the amnesiac realized he should have asked the girl's name. They walked in silence for a time, the young amnesiac man taking in the scenery as he strolled along behind the two strangers. Of course, Frederick walked behind them, effectively boxing him in and preventing his escape.
Here, you must be thirsty.
Oh, thanks.
He jumped a little as Chrom handed him a water skin, unstoppering the neck and drinking without hesitation as they continued to walk. The water inside was warm and tasted faintly of leather, but he hadn't realized just how thirsty he was until the first few drops hit his tongue. Wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, he looked back out over the idyllic countryside, deciding that dwelling on his lost memories at present was a pointless endeavor. All it was doing was giving him a headache, and he'd rather admire the lush green countryside they were traveling through. Long, flowing grass rippling in the wind was on either side of the road. Trees dotted the fields here and there, breaking up the carpet of grass that covered the rolling landscape of light hills. It was picturesque in a way that, for some reason, the man realized he'd never seen before.
I'm kinda hungry.
We're not far from town now. We'll break when we get there.
He nodded, putting the water skin back in the empty pouch at his hip. Wait, not empty after all. There was a thick book in there, too. Surprised that he'd missed the feeling of the heavy book on his hip, he realized that he must have been used to the sensation. The man turned his attention instead back to the two walking in front of him. The girl and Chrom walked calmly enough, completely at ease with the stranger following them and their wild surroundings. He didn't have to look back to know Frederick was still glaring at his back, too. He could feel it like the knight's gaze was poking him with the lance in his hand. He was still unsure as to what they were going to do with him, though.
So am I your prisoner now or something?
Of course not. Once we establish you're not an enemy of Elise, you'll be free to go.
Elise, is that where we are?
Ha! Someone give this actor a reward. He plays quite the fool. Very convincing, even down to the furrow in his brow.
Please, Frederick. If you didn't mistrust everyone we'd met, you'd never speak a word to any but the other shepherds.
Chrom turned to the man, smiling kindly.
We're currently in the Halidom of Elise. Our leader is the Exalt. Her name is Emerin. I guess proper introductions are in order. I'm Chrom, but you already know that. The delicate one here is my sister, Lissa.
I am not delicate. Excuse my brother, he's the thick one in the family. You should be grateful the shepherds found you. If the local bandits had found you, your morning would have been much less fun.
That's the third time you've mentioned being shepherds. You tend sheep in full armor. With weapons like that? What kind of wolves do you guys have in this country?
Not counting Frederick's full plate armor, Chrom was wearing what appeared to be leather plates under his clothes, one arm bare, and the other with a gleaming white shoulder pad. Lissa was wearing a simple yellow dress and carrying an ornate staff with a large blue gem atop it. A healing staff, the man realized without knowing why he knew that information. From her waist down she had some sort of steel cage contraption that the man guessed was some sort of armor. The shepherds were obviously not poor farmers.
It's a dangerous job. Just ask Frederick the Wary here.
Because Naga forbid one of us shows even a modicum of caution.
I'm sure being the watchman for such a noble group is very rewarding. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm Robin.
The group halted around Robin, the amnesiac man in question furrowing his brow and rubbing at his head in confusion.
I just remembered that! Huh. Odd.
Oh, I'm sure you just did.
Frederick, put the lance down. We're almost in town anyway. Once we get there, we can talk properly.
They walked in silence again for a time before climbing up the last small hill before the town. Chrom and Lissa were still ahead of Robin, and as they crested the hill he heard Lissa gasp.
No! Chrom, the town!
Robin and Chrom hurried to the top of the hill, looking down on the town. Robin's eyes took in the entire scene in an instant, his brain processing it all at a speed that frankly frightened him a little. There were a few small buildings, most likely houses for the families that worked in the bigger ones, such as a blacksmith, an inn, and a grocer. In the center of the town, at one end of a large square, was a stone church, its plate glass window in the large tower above the entrance reflecting the afternoon sun lazily. The square in front of the church was paved, although the majority of the roads in the town were compacted dirt. Farming implements lay in piles outside of houses, and the smell of grain and soil pervaded everything. It looked like Robin imagined any other town would, except for the bandits running through it and lighting various buildings on fire and looting whatever they could carry.
Damn it all! I'll bet those are the bandits we've been chasing around the countryside all week. Lissa, Frederick, let's go. Robin, stay here where it's safe. We'll come back for you when it's over.
The three shepherds charged down the hill, Frederick and Chrom in the lead as Lissa trailed behind without so much as a backwards glance. Robin watched them leave, hand unconsciously moving to the book in his pouch. He pulled it out, running a hand over the plain black leather cover. It was old and well worn, obviously heavily read. Robin flipped through it quickly, not making any sense of the complex figures and symbols. But, at the front of the book, something caught his eye.
Blitzschnell? Blitzschnell? Lightning? Is this a spell book? Am I a mage or something?
When nothing leapt out to answer his question, Robin shrugged, studying the page of the book again.
Lightning.
A weak tingling in his fingertips rewarded his efforts, filling him with confidence. With a grin, he held up his hand and tried more forcefully.
Lightning! Ah!
Robin's hand was thrown backwards as a bolt of lightning leapt from it, striking a nearby tree and leaving a large black scorch mark on its trunk. Satisfied, Robin clapped the book closed and hurried to catch up with Chrom and the others.
Probably best not to think about it, right? I'll just give myself another headache.
Before long, he was racing through the outer residences of the town, his boots clapping on the dirt road between buildings. Rounding a corner, he found Chrom dueling with one of the bandits. Lissa crouched behind a barrel off to the side, watching diligently, a staff in her hands. As Robin approached, he saw Frederick ride between buildings, striking left and right with blinding speed at bandits as he went, his lance whistling through the air. Chrom was so intent on the enemy in front of him, though, that he didn't see the bandits sneaking up behind him.
Chrom, down! Lightning!
Both of the bandits and the shepherd looked up at Robin's warning as a much larger bolt of lightning arced from Robin's hand and hit the bandit behind Chrom square in the chest, throwing him off his feet with its force. Taking advantage of his enemy's distraction, Chrom spun and with 3 swift strokes had felled the bandit in front of him. Robin blinked as he approached the other two, looking down at the hand that had launched the spell with newfound appreciation.
Robin!
What are you doing here?
Honestly, I have no idea. It seemed like a good idea at the time. But apparently I can use magic, and there's an old adage about safety in numbers that comes to mind.
Frederick rode up to them while they were talking, blood dripping from the end of his lance despite the fact that his armor was still pristine. He gave Robin a piercing glare, but remained silent as Chrom began to speak again.
Well, I won't begrudge an extra set of hands, especially ones as obviously skilled as yours. Did you find them, Frederick?
My lord, the bandits' leader is making his stand outside the church with a few others.
Very well. Who are we to deny them their last stand?
A thought struck Robin as they began to move towards the center of town, again without any realization of why he would have this knowledge.
Is there a way to get around the buildings and the church from the side?
Yes?
Well, if you two want to hit them from the front, I'll sneak around and flank them.
Chrom smiled again, but this time it was different, predatory. Frederick opened his mouth as if he were about to object, but Chrom cut him off.
I like the sound of that. Go on then, but don't keep us waiting too long.
Robin grinned back and nodded before taking off, skirting buildings and moving through the town. A few bandits got in his way and tried to stop him, but the lightning spell he had been using seemed to be particularly strong or easy to remember, and he made short work of them. Before long, he was looking at the square outside the church, watching Chrom and Frederick trying to reason with the bandit leader.
Here, sheepy, sheepy, come to the slaughter!
Robin shook his head, assessing the enemy's position. 2 archers were standing to one side, arrows already nocked and pointed at Chrom and Frederick. 3 other bandits with swords or axes stood between the shepherds and the bandit leader. Robin decided to take the more serious of the threats and deal with the archers first. With a thought and a hand gesture, Robin sent a bolt of lightning at the further of the 2 archers. Chrom and Frederick used the momentary distraction Robin had caused as their cue to attack.
For release!
Robin readied to strike again, but the second archer was faster, and he found himself dodging to the side as an arrow carved a furrow in his arm. Robin moved, low to the ground as arrows peppered the space he'd been in a second ago. The archer was good. Magic wasn't going to surprise him again. He scooped up a ratty old sword from the corpse of one of the other bandits Frederick had obviously dealt with earlier, and charged the archer. Another near miss from the archer took a chunk out of Robin's leg, but then he was before the archer with his borrowed sword, and with a finesse he didn't know he possessed, Robin spun and ran the archer through. Turning quickly, Robin watched as Frederick and Chrom dealt with the last of their foes, Frederick planting his boot on the shoulder of one of the bandits to pull his lance back from the man's chest.
Wait, where's their leader?
The 3 men spun at once to see the leader. One hand wrapped around Lissa's wrist, dragging her back towards the town, the other one waving an axe in their direction. The entire tactics stank of desperation on the leader's part, and it put a bad taste in the back of Robin's mouth. The bandit leader waved his axe around erratically, his eyes wide as he dragged Lissa back.
She'll bring some nice coin, she will.
No, she will not! The bandit dropped Lissa, flinging her to one side as Chrom and Robin charged him, bringing his axe up at the ready with both hands. Chrom rolled left, avoiding the leader's axe as Robin rolled right. The 2 men brought their swords up at the same time, striking opposite sides of the bandit leader's chest simultaneously. The bandit dropped, and Robin found himself looking down at the corpse aloofly. For some reason he didn't even feel an inkling of guilt for killing the man. Chrom looked as surprised as Robin at his abrupt change from magic to swordsmanship, but smiled as his sister stood up and threw her arms around his neck.
Thank you so much!
Okay, you're welcome. Stepping back from her brother, Lissa looked at Robin with awe.
Wow, Robin, you're amazing! Magic, tactics, and swords?
Yeah, apparently I'm quite the package.
He looked down at the worn old sword in his hand as he spoke. It had just come naturally, even easier than the magic had. That spoke of rigorous training with a blade, if his muscles had automatically taken the weapon up. Robin wondered what exactly he had been before he lost his memories. He could feel tight muscles underneath his clothes, moving effortlessly as he gave the sword a few practice swings. Not as large as Chrom's or Frederick's, but definitely used to handling a blade. It was just a bronze short sword, a piece of junk really, but Robin felt better for having it, and tucked it into his belt opposite to the hip that held his pouch.
My lord, did you notice that the bandit spoke with a Plegian accent?
Robin noticed with a slight frown that the knight's armor was still spotless, despite the dirt and blood he and Chrom were now covered in. Quelling the urge to ask for a bath, Robin looked to Chrom for the answers he was lacking, warily eyeing the villagers as they came out of their hiding places now that the threat was obviously dealt with.
I assume that Plegia is some rival state of Ylisse?
Plegia is the western neighbor of Elise. They like to unofficially send raiding parties into our territory to try and provoke us. There's a lot of history between the two countries. Mostly bad blood between the ruling families.
And it's always the poor villagers that end up paying for it.
She looked around at the devastation that had been wrought by the quick encounter with a stricken expression, and Robin felt a strange pang in his chest as he joined her in surveying the damage. The villagers were beginning to get the small fires under control now, Robin noted with satisfaction. Bucket lines formed as others with the knowledge began to tend to the wounded. He had to credit the Elysians. They certainly weren't lacking in community spirit. Frederick stepped down from his horse, smiling reassuringly at Lissa.
My lady, all due respect, but that is what we are for. Shepherds to protect the sheep. Don't dwell on matters such as these.
I know. Thank you, Frederick.
Milords! Milords!
The 3 shepherds and 1 amnesiac turned to the villager approaching them. The middle-aged man bowed when he reached them, making Robin feel slightly awkward.
Please, milords, we're a simple village, but we would be honored to host you tonight. Give us a few hours, and we can have a royal feast prepared for you all as thanks.
While we appreciate the offer, we really must continue on to our destination with all due haste.
Wait, Frederick, what? But it'll be dark soon!
And when it gets dark, we'll camp the way we always do. Remember, my lady, you're the one who insisted on joining us.
Frederick, sometimes I hate you.
The 3 shepherds and their charge walked for the remaining daylight hours through more of the idyllic Elysian countryside, before Chrom finally stepped off the road, leading the quartet into the light forest that ran alongside it. A few thin trees created shadows, their canopy blocking the last dying rays of the sun and sinking Robin into a premature twilight. Lissa and Frederick both dropped their packs, the big knight going about stripping his saddle from his mount for the evening.
Okay, I think we'll break here for the evening. Robin, come give me a hand finding some dinner. You two, set up camp.
Okay.
Aye, my lord.
Lissa perked up at the prospect of food, Frederick stoically going about his duty of collecting firewood as Chrom led Robin further into the forest. After a few meters, Robin made a face as he stepped in something squishy and yielding, groaning and trying to shake the deer dung off his boot.
Game is pretty plentiful around these parts. We shouldn't have to go far, unless those bandits scared everything off.
Oh, I don't think we'll have to look for very long.
Chrom snickered and shook his head when he realized what had happened, crouching down to inspect the tracks near the droppings.
These seem pretty fresh. It should still be close.
Yeah, that was still fresh too.
They snuck through the woods for a few more minutes, Robin moving as silently as he could while dragging his soiled boot through the grass as he followed Chrom. He was keenly aware of every excess sound he made compared to the man moving ahead of him. Apparently, Chrom was an experienced hunter. A strange metallic scent reached Robin's nose as they came upon a small clearing. In the twilight, it looked like a pile of thick vegetation was moving in one corner of the clearing, until the bear reared up and blinked at them in confusion. Beneath the massive ursine form was the corpse of the deer they had been tracking, already half-eaten.
Back away slowly.
Robin silently nodded, slowly reaching into his pouch and gripping his spellbook as he moved alongside the blue-haired man, Chrom's hand drifting to his sword as he followed his own instructions. The bear let out a low growl, falling forward onto all fours and taking a few ponderous steps towards them. Despite the low light, Robin could clearly make out the glint of the creature's long black claws and its wicked teeth. The blood matting the fur around the creature's muzzle from its fresh kill just made the animal seem all the more nightmarish to him. With a bone-shaking roar, the bear charged, and Chrom and Robin both dodged to the side of the creature. Chrom drew his sword as he rose, stabbing out at the creature as Robin came up onto one knee, flipping through his spellbook, desperately looking for something, anything that could help. Ha! Ah! Oh! Ah! Ha!
Fire! Fire! Fire!
The amnesiac shouted, slapping the page with the spell he was looking for and then indicating at the bear. Balls of fire the size of Robin's head shot out, hitting the bear's flank and filling the clearing with the stink of burned fur. The creature roared again, its voice taking on an unmistakable tone of pain as it rounded on Robin, batting Chrom away with the back of one massive paw and sending the man careening into the nearby bushes. Ah! The new target of the bear's ire leapt backwards as it reared up on its hind legs, paws reaching to the sky. Flipping through his book again, Robin's eyes settled on a new spell.
Elthunder!
A dazzling bolt of lightning jumped from Robin's hand into the bear's face, lighting up the clearing. The creature moaned as the electricity ran through its body, swaying back and forth before finally collapsing backwards. Chrom emerged from the bushes he'd been thrown into, grinning madly as he surveyed Robin's handiwork.
I am so glad we picked you up.
Chrom proceeded to carve a large chunk of meat from the bear's haunch, and within an hour the two men were back at the campsite with Lissa and Frederick, eating the spoils of their trial. The other two had set up their small camp in another small clearing in the light woodland just off the north road, and it hadn't taken much for them to get comfortable. The woodland was dry at this time of year, so firewood had been abundant, and Frederick had apparently had a roaring fire going in no time. Lissa, however, seemed less than impressed, looking up from the meat on her plate with a forlorn expression on her face.
Bear, really?
What's wrong with bear meat? I like bear. It feels like it's been forever since I've eaten it.
There's a good reason for that. You couldn't find something that normal people eat for once, like deer or a hare or something? This is messing with the food chain! Right, Robin?
What?
Robin looked up from where he was stuffing as much of the roasted meat into his face as possible, managing a strangled sound of curiosity in Lissa's direction. Lissa just groaned, poking at the lump of meat in front of her disinterestedly.
Forget it. Birds of a feather.
Come now, my lady. It's really not that bad.
So why aren't you eating any?
I, had a big lunch? Yes, a big lunch, and now my appetite fails me.
Robin took his chance, reaching over and snatching the uneaten bear from Frederick's plate.
Whatever, more for me.
Lissa didn't look at all convinced by Frederick's lame excuse, but before she could call him out, Robin began to choke, dropping the chunk of meat he'd been inhaling and gripping his throat as he turned blue.
You shouldn't be eating so fast, Robin.
I told you I was hungry!
I suppose anyone would enjoy eating this after starving for days.
It's really not that bad. You just pretend that instead of the texture of boots and tasting like leather, it tastes like, meat.
Robin grinned as he laughed along with the three shepherds, taking another bite of his dinner. If this was to be one of the earliest memories he retained, at least it was a good one, the forest ringing with their laughter as they relaxed and chatted after saving the village. Just the thought made Robin feel content as the distasteful meat slid down his throat.